Simon John, stooped with age but sharp-eyed beneath his unkempt gray hair, shuffled through the fortified gates. The guards, a pair of towering creatures with skin that shimmered like molten silver, raised their weapons immediately. Their multi-jointed limbs moved with unnerving precision, the edges of their alien faces twisting into unreadable expressions. Simon didn't flinch. His steps, deliberate and uneven, echoed hollowly in the sterile corridor. The ragged cloak he wore dragged along the floor, its frayed edges brushing against his worn boots. He kept his head slightly bowed, eyes darting with faint curiosity, as though an innocent traveler had wandered too far. A bead of sweat slid down his temple, but his voice, when it came, was calm. "Forgive the intrusion," he rasped, his earth-accented words thick with an air of vulnerability. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'm just lost." One of the guards hissed a guttural reply in its native tongue before switching to a rough approximation of human speech. "Lost? No one stumbles here by chance, human. Explain yourself." Simon raised his hands slowly, palms outward. "I was scavenging," he said, gesturing vaguely to his threadbare clothes. "Didn't realize I'd crossed into alien space. If I'd known, I'd have turned back. Honest mistake." The guards exchanged glances, their mandibles clicking softly in a language Simon didn't need to understand to interpret. Suspicion, fear, protocol. Their hesitation lingered just long enough for another figure to emerge from the shadows, his presence commanding and sinister. Lieutenant Suresh was lean and tall, his elongated features carved with the arrogance of youth. A faint bioluminescent glow radiated from the veins beneath his translucent skin, giving him an otherworldly aura. His black armor clung tightly to his wiry frame, its surface etched with ornate markings denoting rank. The lieutenant's eyes, a pale and predatory shade of violet, narrowed as they fell on Simon. "This one is no mere scavenger," Suresh declared. His voice carried an air of authority, though Simon detected the eager hunger of ambition lurking beneath. "Take him. Bind him. He may be of value." Simon made no move to resist his cold. Metal restraints snapped around his wrists. He only sighed, a low, weary sound that seemed to unnerve the guards more than any struggle might have. As they led him deeper into the facility, he took in every detail. The placement of the surveillance devices, the faint hum of energy shields, the layout of the halls. The alien architecture was as alien in function as in form, but Simon's calculating mind began mapping it with ease. They entered a cavernous chamber bathed in an unsettling green light. At its center was an interrogation platform, surrounded by translucent consoles that flickered with streams of alien glyphs. Commander Vrikel loomed there, his massive frame dwarfing the others. His armor was heavier, adorned with emblems of countless battles. Unlike Suresh's sharp, angular visage, Vrikel's features were broad and brutal, his expression one of measured pragmatism. "What is this?" Vrikel growled, his voice like grinding stone. He studied Simon with a critical gaze, as if dissecting him mentally before speaking further. "You bring me a decrepit human, Lieutenant. What value does he hold?" Suresh stepped forward, his tone defensive yet firm. "Commander, I believe this man is no ordinary vagrant. His presence here is too convenient. If he is a spy, he could lead us to their movements." Vrikel snorted, unconvinced. "He looks like he can barely stand, let alone spy. But fine. Let us test your theory." Simon was thrust onto the platform, the restraints holding him in place with mechanical efficiency. He gazed up at the aliens, his expression unreadable. Vrikel leaned closer, his glowing yellow eyes boring into Simon's. "Speak," the commander ordered. "Why are you here?" Simon blinked slowly, his lips twitching into what could almost be called a smile. "I've already told your friends. A mistake. A poor, tired old man looking for scraps to survive. Isn't it obvious?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the consoles. Vrikel's gaze hardened. He turned to Suresh. "He's playing with us." Increase the neural stimulator. A jolt of electricity coursed through the restraints, and Simon's body jerked violently. He let out a guttural groan, but his eyes remained locked on the commander, defiance flickering in their depths. When the shock ceased, he sagged against the platform, breathing heavily. "Careful," Simon murmured, his voice hoarse yet mocking. "You might kill me before you get the answers you're looking for." Suresh's impatience flared. "He's hiding something. Let me use the—" "Enough," Vrykul interrupted, raising a hand. He stared at Simon for a long moment, then straightened. "If he is lying, he will slip in time. Place him in isolation. No food, no water. Let hunger loosen his tongue." The guards moved to drag Simon away, but he didn't go quietly. He turned his head, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone steady despite his apparent frailty. "I'm far more useful to you alive than dead. Think carefully before you discard me." The commander hesitated, his expression darkening, but he waved the guards on. As Simon was hauled through the halls toward a dark, windowless cell, he allowed himself the faintest of smiles. Beneath the battered cloak, a tiny light blinked rhythmically on his belt buckle, transmitting a message across the void of space. Simon sat on the cold floor of his cell, listening to the alien guards argue faintly beyond the thick walls. He leaned his head back, closing his eyes as if in resignation, but his mind raced, calculating. The bait was set, the trap was tightening, and he could already hear the distant echoes of humanity's approach. The control room of the Terran Defense Command buzzed with muted tension. Walls lined with holographic displays streamed data in a flurry of light and color, painting the air with soft glows of tactical readouts. In the center of it all stood Colonel Nathaniel Ward, his broad shoulders and square jaw giving him the aura of a leader forged in the crucible of war. His sharp green eyes scanned the incoming message, the encrypted signal blinking persistently on the main console. "Is it him?" Nate asked, his voice low and steady, though his clenched fist betrayed his anticipation. Chief Engineer Theo James, a wiry man with perpetually disheveled hair and a knack for deciphering the impossible, adjusted his glasses as he worked furiously at the terminal. Streams of alien code dissolved into comprehensible human language under his touch. "It's Simon," Theo confirmed, his tone tinged with awe and disbelief. "He used the old encryption protocols. He's alive, sir. And he's sending us coordinates." The room fell silent. Simon John was a name that carried weight, both as a legend and as a ghost, to many in the room. He was the architect of humanity's greatest victories against the alien forces years ago, a general who had outwitted even the most cunning enemy commanders. To Nate, he was something more, a mentor and a reminder of what it meant to put everything on the line for survival. "Coordinates to what?" Captain Owen Grayson interjected, his voice sharp. The cocky fighter pilot leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his piercing blue eyes narrowing. "A trap, maybe? We don't know what's waiting for us out there." Lieutenant Gary Hales, a calm and calculating soldier with a reputation for precision, stepped forward. "Simon wouldn't risk sending us false information. If he's reaching out, it's for a reason." Nate nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. He glanced back at Theo, who was analyzing the data. "What's the location?" Theo hesitated, then looked up. "It's deep in alien-controlled space, a remote outpost orbiting a dead planet. Minimal activity on the surface, but the signal strength suggests it's a strategic node. That's why he's there," Nate said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "He let himself get captured to lure them in. He's baiting them, and now he's calling us to spring the trap." Owen scoffed. "Baiting them? With what?" "His charming personality. We don't even know how many of them are there. Could be a whole fleet for all we know. Simon doesn't act without purpose," Nate replied, his tone firm. "If he's there, it's because he's already considered every angle. We can't afford to ignore this." The room grew quiet again, the weight of the decision settling on them. Nate paced, his boots clicking softly against the metal floor. He could feel the eyes of his team on him, waiting for direction. "We need a strike team," he said finally. "Small, fast, and precise. We get in, extract Simon, and neutralize the outpost." Owen straightened, his grin sharp. "About time we took the fight to them. Count me in." Gary gave a short nod. "You'll need boots on the ground to deal with the outpost defenses." "I'll lead the ground team. And I'll keep the tech running," Theo added, his fingers already dancing across the keyboard. "I'll map the outpost layout and find us the best entry points." Nate stopped pacing and faced them. "This isn't a standard op. We're heading into hostile territory, and there's no guarantee of a clean exit. If Simon's right, this outpost could hold critical intel on alien operations. If we fail, they'll use it against us." Owen smirked, his confidence unshaken. "Failure's not in my vocabulary, Colonel." "Then let's make sure it stays that way," Nate said. "Gear up. We move in 6 hours." The team dispersed, each member preparing for the mission in their own way. Nate lingered by the console, staring at the blinking coordinates. His thoughts turned to Simon, the old man who had taught him how to think 3 moves ahead in every battle. Simon had always been the kind of leader who could turn the tide with nothing but a clever ploy and a sheer will to win. Now, he was relying on them to bring that same ingenuity to his rescue. In the armory, Gary checked his equipment methodically, his movements precise and deliberate. He glanced at Owen, who was leaning against a crate, casually inspecting his sidearm. "Do you ever take anything seriously?" Gary asked, his tone neutral but edged with curiosity. Owen shrugged. "Sure, I take winning seriously. Everything else? Not so much." Gary shook his head, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Just don't let that attitude get us killed." "Relax," Owen replied, slapping the sidearm into its holster. "I've got your back. Always do." Meanwhile, Theo worked in the ship's tech bay, his brow furrowed as he analyzed the encrypted signal again. He couldn't shake the feeling that Simon's message carried more than just coordinates. There was a pattern in the data, something subtle and deliberate. It was as if Simon had embedded a secondary message, meant to be found by someone who knew where to look. Theo's fingers froze on the keyboard as the realization hit him. "Colonel Ward," he called over the comms. "There's more to Simon's signal. It's a warning." Nate appeared moments later, his expression sharp. "What kind of warning?" Theo pointed to the screen. "He's flagged potential reinforcements. The outpost isn't heavily guarded now, but it won't stay that way. He's expecting us to hit fast before the aliens reinforce." Nate nodded grimly. "Then we'll need to move faster." "Good work, Theo." As the ship prepared for departure, the team gathered in the hangar. The tension was palpable, but so was the determination. Nate looked at each of them, his voice steady as he addressed them. "Simon John has risked everything to bring us this chance. If we succeed, we don't just save him. We deal a critical blow to the enemy. They think they've captured a helpless old man. They have no idea what's coming." The team boarded the dropship, the engines roaring to life. As they launched into the void of space, the coordinates burned bright on the NAV system, a beacon pulling them deeper into enemy territory. The trap was set, the pieces in motion. There was no turning back now. The alien warship drifted in orbit, its hull an imposing expanse of blackened metal veined with glowing conduits of energy. Inside the vessel, the atmosphere buzzed with restrained urgency. Commander Vreichel stood at the helm of the operations deck, his heavy armor gleaming dully under the pale lights. His clawed hands gripped the edge of the console as his golden eyes narrowed at the holographic projection before him, a schematic of the outpost and its surrounding sector. "Status report," he barked, his gravelly voice cutting through the quiet hum of the room. Lieutenant Suresh, standing nearby, straightened to attention. Though younger and less experienced, Suresh carried himself with the sharp arrogance of one eager to prove his worth. "Surveillance shows no significant activity in the surrounding systems, Commander. If the humans are planning an operation, they're masking it well." Vreichel's gaze lingered on the map, his brow furrowing. The humans had proven resourceful before, and the idea of underestimating them gnawed at the edges of his instincts. He turned his attention to the old man confined in the isolation chamber below, his thoughts heavy with doubt. "This human," he said, his tone measured. He remained silent. Suresh hesitated, his mandibles twitching faintly. "Yes, Commander. He's spoken little since the interrogation. I've increased security around his cell, but I still believe he's hiding something." Vrikel's jaw tightened. He didn't need to be told that the human was unusual. The old man's calm defiance in the interrogation chamber had unsettled even him. He had seen humans break under far less pressure, their fragile bodies and minds crumbling swiftly under alien methods. But this one, Simon John, was different. He had offered no pleas, no bargains, only a measured silence, broken occasionally by cryptic remarks that seemed to carry hidden meanings. "What if he is bait?" Vrikel said aloud, his voice laced with suspicion. Suresh tilted his head. "Bait, Commander?" Vrikel turned to face him fully, his imposing figure dwarfing the younger officer. "Humans are cunning creatures. Their strength lies not in their numbers, but in their ability to deceive. This one may have allowed himself to be captured to lure us into a trap." The younger alien bristled, his pride stung. "If that's true, Commander, then we should eliminate him immediately and deny the humans whatever scheme they intend to unfold." "No," Vrikel said firmly, his voice a low growl. "Killing him without understanding his purpose would be reckless. If he is bait, then we must learn what he is hiding. And if he is merely a wandering fool, his death will serve no purpose." Suresh clenched his claws, clearly displeased with the commander's caution, but wise enough not to argue. He nodded stiffly. "I'll double the patrols around the outpost and conduct another sweep of the sector. If the humans approach, they won't go unnoticed." As Suresh left to carry out his orders, Vrikel remained rooted in place, his thoughts churning. The humans had a knack for turning the tides of battle in their favor, often at the last moment. It was a trait he both respected and despised. He glanced at the projection again, his gaze lingering on the coordinates where Simon John had been captured. Something about the location gnawed at him. A quiet, barren world on the outskirts of their territory, devoid of strategic importance. Why would a human of such obvious intellect venture there? In the isolation cell, Simon sat cross-legged on the cold floor, his back resting against the wall. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and steady. To the guards monitoring him, he appeared docile, even broken, but in truth, his mind was racing. Every sound in the corridor, every vibration in the walls, fed him information about the ship's layout and operations. His hidden communicator had fallen silent for now, but he knew the signal had reached its destination. The pieces of the plan were in motion. The door to the cell hissed open, and Simon opened his eyes to see Suresh enter, flanked by 2 guards. The lieutenant's expression was a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "You've been silent for too long, human," Suresh said, his tone sharp. "It's time you told us why you're here." Simon gave him a faint smile, the corners of his lips curling with the kind of calm confidence that only served to irritate his captor further. "I've already told you. I was scavenging. An old man trying to survive." "Lies," Suresh hissed, stepping closer. "You don't belong here. You're hiding something, and I will uncover it." Simon's smile widened, his voice steady and low. "Perhaps. But are you sure your commander would approve of you coming here alone, wasting your time interrogating a helpless old man?" Suresh froze, his mandibles twitching in uncertainty. The human's words struck a nerve, as if Simon had seen through his every intention. The guards shifted uncomfortably, their weapons at the ready, but the old man made no move to threaten them. "Get comfortable, Lieutenant," Simon continued, his tone almost conversational. "You may not like what you find." In the command center, Vrikel stared at the latest surveillance feeds, his unease growing. Something wasn't right. The outpost perimeter sensors were picking up faint distortions in the surrounding space. Nothing conclusive, but enough to trigger his instincts. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "I want all ships on standby. If the humans are coming, we'll be ready." As his officers scrambled to carry out his commands, Vrykul felt a deep, simmering frustration. The humans were like shadows, always just out of reach, always one step ahead. And now, with Simon John in his grasp, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder than ever. If he failed to uncover the truth, it wouldn't just be his reputation at stake. It would be the entire fleet. In the isolation cell, Simon leaned back against the wall, his smile fading as the door closed behind Suresh. The lieutenant's arrogance would be his downfall, Simon thought. He had seen it before. Young commanders too eager to prove themselves, too blind to see the larger game at play. The alien forces would soon realize their mistake, but by then, it would be too late. The trap was tightening, and Simon John knew exactly how to spring it. The air crackled with the hum of energy weapons as the human strike team descended through the thin atmosphere of the barren world. Colonel Nathaniel Ward tightened his grip on the edge of the dropship's hatch, his sharp green eyes fixed on the alien outpost below. It was a jagged monolith of metal and light, its angular architecture jutting out of the desolate ground like a wound in the planet's surface. Every instinct in Nate's battle-hardened mind told him they were flying into a storm, but there was no turning back now. Simon John had set the pieces in motion, and it was time to play the hand they'd been dealt. Beside him, Captain Owen Grayson smirked as he adjusted the straps on his flight suit. "It's a beautiful day for a fight, don't you think?" he quipped, his tone light despite the gravity of their mission. "You'll get your fight, Grayson," Nate replied without turning. "Just don't forget we're here to extract Simon, not play hero." "Heroes make the best stories, Colonel," Owen shot back, but his grin faded as he readied his sidearm. Beneath his bravado, even he felt the weight of the operation. The dropship's engines roared as it banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a burst of plasma fire from the outpost's automated defenses. At the helm, Chief Engineer Theo James worked furiously to disable the alien systems. His fingers danced over the console, sweat beading on his brow as lines of alien code scrolled rapidly across the screen. "Give me 30 seconds, Theo called out. "I'm patching into their shield network now." "Make it 20, Nate said, his voice tight. The ship shuddered as another blast grazed their shields. "We won't last much longer up here." Theo muttered a curse under his breath but didn't look up. "Almost there, and got it. Shields down." "Grayson, take us in," Nate ordered. The dropship dove toward the outpost, skimming just above the surface before landing with a thud. The ramp lowered, and Nate was the first to step into the harsh light of the alien structure, his rifle raised and ready. Gary Hales followed closely behind, his movements precise and methodical as he signaled the rest of the team to fan out. Inside the outpost, Simon John sat calmly in his cell, his posture relaxed despite the chaos beginning to unfold. He could feel the subtle tremors in the walls, the distant echoes of combat drawing closer. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. They were here, right on time. The door to his cell hissed open, and 2 alien guards stormed in, their weapons raised. Simon didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly got to his feet, his eyes glinting with a quiet confidence. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth and unhurried, "you might want to look behind you." Before the guards could react, the sound of gunfire filled the corridor. Gary Hales appeared in the doorway, his rifle trained on the stunned aliens. 2 precise shots later, the guards collapsed and Gary stepped into the cell. "General John," Gary said, offering a brief nod of respect. "Colonel Ward sent us to bring you home." Simon tilted his head, a faint look of amusement crossing his face. "Took you long enough. We've got a lot of moving pieces, sir," Gary replied. "But we're getting out of here now." As they moved through the corridors, the outpost erupted into chaos. Vrykul stood in the command center, his golden eyes blazing with fury as reports of the human incursion flooded in. The humans had struck with precision, exploiting every weakness in their defenses. His claws raked across the console as he barked orders to his subordinates. Seal the exits. Deploy reinforcements to the lower levels. They will not escape. Suresh, standing at his commander's side, hesitated for a fraction of a second. Perhaps we should fall back and regroup. This outpost is critical to our operations. Vrykul snarled, cutting him off. I will not let it fall to these vermin. If you lack the stomach to fight, Lieutenant, stay out of my way. The younger officer flinched but said nothing, his pride burning beneath his glowing violet eyes. In the depths of the outpost, Nate and his team fought their way toward the extraction point. Owen Grayson covered their rear, his expert marksmanship keeping the pursuing alien forces at bay. Plasma bolts streaked past him, scorching the walls and filling the air with acrid smoke. "Hurry it up!" Owen shouted, his voice strained but steady. "I can't hold them off forever. We're almost there," Nate called back, glancing over his shoulder to ensure Simon was keeping pace. Despite his age, the former general moved with surprising agility, his years of experience evident in every step. As they reached the extraction point, Theo's voice crackled over the comms. "Bad news, Colonel. Their reinforcements are coming in hot. We've got a window, but it's closing fast." Nate's jaw tightened. "Then we make this quick. Everyone on the dropship, now." The team hurried aboard as the dropship's engines roared to life. Plasma fire rained down around them, and Owen barely managed to leap onto the ramp before it closed. The ship lifted off, weaving through the alien defenses as Theo worked frantically to maintain their shields. But Vrykul was not done. From the command center, he activated the outpost's automated turrets, their deadly fire locking onto the fleeing ship. His lips curled into a grim smile as he watched the humans struggle. Simon, standing at the edge of the ship's cabin, observed the unfolding chaos with a calculating gaze. He turned to Nate, his expression calm but resolute. "Colonel, get us close to the outpost's main power core." Nate frowned. "What are you planning?" "A final move," Simon replied, his voice low. "One that will ensure this outpost is no longer a problem." Despite his misgivings, Nate nodded. "Grayson, you heard him. Get us there." The dropship banked sharply, skimming dangerously close to the outpost surface. Simon retrieved a small device from his cloak, a prototype explosive of his own design. As the ship passed over the power core, he activated the device and hurled it out the hatch. The explosion that followed was blinding. A chain reaction tore through the outpost, its energy conduits overloading and collapsing in a cascade of fire and light. The alien turrets fell silent, and the outpost began to crumble, consumed by the destruction. As the dropship ascended into the safety of space, Simon leaned back against the cabin wall, his expression unreadable. Around him, the team caught their breath, their faces a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Nate approached him, his voice quiet. "That was risky, General." Simon met his gaze, a faint smile playing at his lips. "War is always risky, Colonel, but sometimes you have to take the leap." As the ship sped away, leaving the burning outpost behind, the crew fell into a heavy silence. They had won a critical victory, but Simon's calm demeanor served as a reminder that the war was far from over. The aliens would regroup, and humanity would need every ounce of cunning and resolve to face what came next. For now, though, the trap had been sprung, and Simon John had once again proven that even in the darkest moments, humanity had the strength to rise. As the dropship pierced the void of space, leaving the smoldering remains of the alien outpost far behind, a quiet tension filled the cabin. The crew sat in silence, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's interior lights. The weight of their success hung heavy in the air, tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. Simon John sat apart from the others, his gaze fixed on the infinite blackness outside the window. His features, lined with age and experience, betrayed no emotion, but his mind churned with thoughts of the battles yet to come. The aliens would not take this loss lightly. He knew their retaliation would be swift and brutal. But he also knew that humanity was resilient, capable of turning even the bleakest of situations into opportunities for victory. Nate approached him, breaking the stillness. "We'll fight them, General. Whatever they throw at us, we'll be ready." Simon turned to him, a faint smile on his lips. "Readiness isn't enough, Colonel. They'll come for us with everything they have. It's not just about surviving. It's about making them regret ever thinking they could break us